Kunjabi Adi Adhava Kunjabi Adi Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dadi Pijana Bhalabha Girivara Dadi Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dadi Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dadi Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Jamanatira Bhanachadi Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivara Dadi 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 Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Dana Brajajanandana Jamana Tira Vanachadi Jamuna Tira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Madhava Kunjabi Adi Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivijagacharya Astatara Satyasi Srimad His Divine Grace Easy Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavati Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Been a while, but here we are again, back visiting in St. Louis. I've been in the mornings for the most part. There's some other things that have been going on because of festivals and things like that, but for couple months, something like that, discussing Uddhava Gita. As you see the image cut off, somehow it's cut off. there's Uddhava at his feet. The scene of Uddhava Gita is conduct the yajna. Many brahmanas come, and it's a grand event. And after the event, they go to a not far away place where they are taking their meal and associating with one another, and kind of relax after the big festival. And some of the boys from Dwarka, because at this time Vasudeva was in Dwarka. So near Dwarka, they went to a nice place. And some of the boys from Dwarka went there, and they spoofed on the brahmanas. Samba, one of Krishna's children, dressed up like a woman, wearing a sari, had a big lump of iron underneath the sari, and was looking away shyly, and the other boys wanted to ask the brahmanas, this shy lady here, she's pregnant, she wants to know if it's going to be a boy or a girl. And their answer was that it's not going to be a boy or a girl, it's going to bring the destruction of the entire Yadu dynasty. For this offense, offending the brahmanas, the entire Yadu dynasty will be at risk because of you boys. So it wasn't a child, it was a lump of iron. And so the boys were very afraid. Offending a brahmana is very serious business. And so the boys, iron, and grind it into little powder, and then throw the powder into the sea. So that order was carried out, and everything was ground except for one piece of that lump that wouldn't grind. And so that piece was thrown into the sea also. The powder washed up to the shore at Prabhas, which is another sacred place, and a festival of this offense to the brahmanas. Prabhas has some acclaim. It's known for persons who have made some mistakes to overcome those mistakes by going to Prabhas and performing some rituals. So Krishna gave that direction. Then after Krishna gave that direction, they were preparing. The thing hadn't happened yet. The demigods come. This is going back to chapter 6. The demigods come when Krishna is in a secluded place or not seen by everybody. And the demigods offer their prayers. And they specifically then say, the purpose for which you appeared in this world has been fulfilled. We appealed. You came. The demons are killed. You may, as you wish, return to your spiritual realm. We're very grateful. And they disappeared. Then Krishna's contemplating. The stage has been set. It's his internal potency setting the stage for the withdrawal of the Yadu dynasty. And I want one of those members of the Yadu dynasty to remain behind. Kind of like Ram left Hanuman. So Krishna left Uddhava. But I'd like to instruct Uddhava thoroughly in spiritual teachings, and then have him spread it around the world and go to Badrik Ashram and give association to the sages there, because that's one place I didn't go during the pastimes. And chapter 6 ends with the scene that you see here on the screen. Uddhava came to Krishna, and he's so close to Krishna, he knew he's going to leave. And so 2 things, he said, please take me with you. And the second was, so that I can understand you without obstruction, please remove the obstruction. And the obstruction is my undue attachment to family life. And because of that, it's very similar to what Kunti's prayers were. Too much attachment, then my intelligence is covered and I don't see things properly. So then chapter 7 begins, 7, 8, and 9 are, notice we're in chapter 10. 7, 8, 9, Krishna directly answers the question. Uddhava asks it again. Krishna then spends the rest of 7 and 8 and 9 narrating a story to Uddhava that is a story involving one of their ancestors, King Yadu. They're both from the Yadu dynasty. And so he narrates, King Yadu once was touring his kingdom. He saw an Avadhuta Brahmana, and he was astonished at his characteristics, etc., etc., etc. And he asked the Avadhuta Brahmana, how did you get to this stage of your life? And the Avadhuta Brahmana describes how he got there. He had 24 gurus, and each one of them taught him lessons about transcendental. So the whole theme is transcendental knowledge and detachment, because that was the question. How do I become too much? I'm too much attached. How do I relieve myself of that? So knowledge and detachment, Jnana Vairagya. And the purpose of Jnana Vairagya is incomplete or unfulfilled without bhakti. Without bhakti. So bhakti needs to be there. And knowledge and detachment is needed for bhakti to make its full manifestation. So that's what we're hearing. And then after that narration ends in chapter 9, chapter 10 begins. Krishna is now explaining more on the how to, because that was the question, how to attain that stage like the Brahmana, the Avadhuta Brahmana attained. Although you're not a Brahmana, you're a Kshatriya, how to attain what he attained. So it's a how-to chapter. And in the chapter, there's also abundant knowledge of detachment. It's the angle is how to, but it's certainly Sambandha Gyan. And we're in the category of spirit, and affinity for matter blocks our understanding of who we are, and which blocks our understanding of who is Krishna. So that's the topic, and it's been very interesting. Now we're going to go to text 21. So it's Krishna speaking to Uddhava. The material happiness of which we hear, such as promotion to heavenly planets for celestial enjoyment, is just like that material happiness we have already experienced. Both are polluted by jealousy, envy, decay, and death. Therefore, just as an attempt to raise crops becomes fruitless if there are many problems like crop disease, insect plague, or drought. Similarly, the attempt to attain material happiness, either on earth or on the heavenly planets, is always fruitless because of innumerable obstacles. And what I've been doing here, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur very kindly made a commentary exclusively on Uddhava Gita. I mean, he did many other things, but it's one of the things he did. So I'm going to be reading his translation, his commentary, and his summary or rephrasing of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, and then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. So you'll hear it, different angles of vision on the same thing, like 6 times. So here's Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. The material happiness that is available in the heavenly planets is discussed in the Vedas, but it is simply a royal version of the happiness found on earth. Life here and life in heaven are both polluted by envy, deterioration, and death. Just as a farmer has to contend with many problems while growing crops, such as drought or the attack of insects, similarly, the attempt to become happy, whether on earth or in heaven, is fraught with many difficulties. And this is the BBT purport. BBT purport means Prabhupada did not write this. And you'll notice the language is a little different. In fact, you'll notice, if you know Hridayananda Maharaj a little bit, you know this is his writing. I heard from Dravida Prabhu, who did the editing of all of this, that most of the work of the later cantos was Gopi Pranadhana's work. And Hridayananda Maharaj looked it over. But this has got Hridayananda Maharaj's language and sarcasm and, things like that within it. That's my opinion. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows on this verse. Quote, ordinarily, if there is no specific impediment, agricultural endeavors will yield their fruits. If, however, there is a defect in the seed, or if the soil is too salty or barren, or if there is drought, plague, excessive rain, or heat out of season, or if there are disturbances caused by animals, birds, and insects, then agricultural activities will not yield the desired harvest. Similarly, those who are expert in analyzing the material world see that the heavenly situations offered in the Vedas are not basically different from life on the earth. By the interaction of conditioned souls, there will inevitably be jealousy as one becomes distinguished as superior and another as inferior. By the power of time, these positions are reversed, and therefore violence and intrigue disturb life even on the heavenly planets. In fact, the attempt to promote oneself to the heavenly planets is itself full of problems and disturbances. One should therefore understand that the kingdom of God, Vaikuntha, is transcendental to the limitations and disturbances imposed by the laws of material nature in this world. If one wrongly concludes that such imperfections are also present in the kingdom of God, then one will be polluted by material contamination. So this is now Bhaktisiddhanta's actual commentary, which was quoted in the BBT commentary or purport. After concluding that there is no happiness in this world, it is being described that there is no happiness in the heavenly planets as well. The information that there is ample happiness in the heavenly planets is illusory. In heaven, there is arrogance because one person is envious of others' happiness. And there is destruction when one's accumulated piety is exhausted. As agriculture is troublesome and sometimes unproductive, the performance of sacrifice and other pious acts which award one heavenly residence is ultimately of no avail. So two more. This is now Bhaktisiddhanta kind of restating Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. It's just restating same message. When the farmer plants his crops, he has to worry about so many potential problems, such as defective seeds, drought, plague of insects, excessive heat, and so on. Similarly, the attempt to enjoy happiness in this world, whether on earth or in heaven, is accompanied by anxiety due to jealousy, cheating, and so on. When the conditioned souls interact, there's naturally competition and envy, because that is the very nature of material existence. Due to the influence of time, no position within the material world is stable, and so, when there are reverses, violence and intrigue create great disturbances, both here and in heaven. Even the attempt to attain a heavenly destination is also fraught with many difficulties. Therefore, one should inquire about the eternal abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is far beyond the disturbances of this material world. The previous previous messages were to not indulge in the senses with the sense objects, because now it's going to, and in the heavenly planet, same thing. Don't refrain from sense indulgence so you can achieve heavenly happiness. That's kind of what people do. I mean, some people, they undergo some difficulty so they can have greater enjoyment at a later point in time. Whether it's, in a career path, you undergo some austerity so you can get a better position, or karma kanda rituals where you undergo something to get a better position, and so on. Aspiring for another temporary higher position is not advised. It's just another iteration of the same thing here. Here's Vishwanath's actual commentary. It's short. It has been said that there is no happiness in this world, the previous section. There is also no happiness in this next world, the happiness Shrutam. Like the happiness of the present world is spoiled by intolerance of others' happiness, attributing fault to others' good qualities, by death and gradual destruction of what little happiness Swarga gives by enjoying it, and because one obtains happiness only after overcoming defects in actions of sacrifice. It is like farming, where sometimes there is no result. Okay, that was text 11. I think I have one devotee, very creative young devotee, Shruti Mangara, has taken on the project of illustrating the entire Uddhava Gita, and this is an illustration for this verse. That material happiness of which we hear, such as promotion to heavenly planets for celestial enjoyment, is just like that material happiness we have already experienced. Both are polluted by jealousy, envy, decay, and death. Therefore, just as an attempt to raise crops becomes fruitless if there are many problems like crop disease, insect plague, and drought, similarly, the attempt to attain material happiness, either on earth or in the heavenly planets, is always fruitless because of innumerable obstacles. So sometimes she has like 3 or 4 or even more verses or illustrations per verse. This is just one for here. Moving on, text 22. If one performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without any mistake or contamination, one will achieve a heavenly situation in the next life. But even this result, which is only achieved by perfect performance of fruitive rituals, will be vanquished by time. Now hear of this. So that's the next verse. Commentary here is short. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. Even if one properly performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without committing any mistake or offense, the result of attaining the heavenly planets obtained by such activities will be destroyed in due course of time. Listen as I now explain this to you. Here's the BBT purport. The word gacchati means going. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna states, agama payon nitya. All material experiences, good or bad, come and go. Gacchati is go. Therefore, the word gacchati refers to the disappearance of the results of even the most meticulously performed fruitive sacrifices. Any material situation, from the worst to the best, is imperfect. Thus, one should strive only for pure Krishna consciousness. And Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary is one sentence. Even if one avoids mistakes and offenses while performing Vedic rituals, it is impossible to avoid the miseries felt at the time of destruction. This is being described in the following 5 verses. We're going to hear a lot about don't go there. Don't strive to reach heaven. So if that door is closed, then what do? Transcendence. Okay, here's Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. No, excuse me, this is Bhaktisiddhanta's his own purport. Unless one very carefully executes religious rituals, various obstacles will come in his way, but even if one is able to perform such rituals properly and without encountering any obstacles, the result obtained is temporary because, whether good or bad, all material conditions are imperfect. In Vishwanath's commentary, really short. Even if one performs acts without discrepancies, one cannot eliminate suffering. This is explained in 5 verses. Nirjitam means accomplished. Okay, so one of those 5 verses, it's saying don't try to go there, to heaven. If on earth one performs sacrifices for the satisfaction of the demigods, he goes to the heavenly planets, where, just like a demigod, he enjoys all the heavenly pleasures he has earned by his performance. It's not to say the result doesn't come. It's to say the result resembles this one. The happiness of the soul is missed. So it's a limited and temporary result. Same as Bhagavad Gita. It's a Bhagavad Gita message expanded. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation: pious people attain the heavenly planets by worshipping the demigods with the performance of Vedic sacrifices. By means of their accumulated piety, they enjoy heavenly pleasures just like the demigods. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport: the demigods award their worshippers their desired goal. People who perform Vedic sacrifices to please the demigods attain the heavenly planets as a result of their worship, and thus enjoy heavenly pleasures. Such enjoyment, however, is temporary, and the worshippers of the demigods have to return to earth after exhausting their pious merit. Bhagavad Gita, Shine Punya Marcha Lokam Vishanti. Just being restated here. Now there's one more reference, and this one more reference is Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila chapter 8. Madhya Lila chapter 8 is where Lord Chaitanya is having his discussion with Ramananda Roy. The discussion with Ramananda Roy is Lord Chaitanya, as a sannyasi, is now traveling in South India, advised by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the chief priest there in Puri. He recommended to Lord Chaitanya, please visit Ramananda Roy. He's a very elevated person. He's the mayor of Madras, then when Prabhupada was translating Madras or Chennai. It was not just a city, it was a whole tract of land. He was a very capable administrator under the king. And so Lord Chaitanya visited Ramananda Roy, and they had some discussion. Lord Chaitanya said, what is the destination of those who desire liberation and those who desire sense gratification? Ramananda Roy replied, those who attempt to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord will have to accept bodies like those of trees. And that's not in the spiritual world either. And those who are overly inclined towards sense gratification will attain the bodies of demigods. What? Purport. Those who desire liberation by merging into the existence of God do not desire sense gratification within the material world. On the other hand, they have no information about serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Consequently, they are doomed to stand like trees for many thousands of years. Although trees are living entities, they are non-moving. The liberated souls who merge into the existence of the Lord is no better than the trees. The trees also stand in the Lord's existence because material energy and the Lord's energy are the same. Similarly, the Brahman effulgence is also the energy of the Supreme Lord. It is the same whether one remains in the material, because in neither is there spiritual activity. Better situated are those who desire sense gratification and promotion to the heavenly planets in the gardens of paradise. Some people want to enjoy themselves in these places. They at least retain their individuality in order to enjoy life. But the impersonalists who try to lose their individuality also lose both material and spiritual pleasure. The last destination of the Buddhist philosophers is to become just like a stone, which is immovable and has neither material nor spiritual activity. As far as the hard-working karmis are concerned, Bhagavatam states in this verse here, quote, after performing various sacrificial rituals for elevation to the heavenly planets, the karmis go there and enjoy themselves with the demigods to the extent that they have obtained the results of pious activities. Then he refers to Bhagavad Gita 9:20-21. So this is not Prabhupada's translation of those verses. It's Bhaktisiddhanta. Those who study the Vedas drink soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planets of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. Therefore, after finishing the results of pious activities, the karmis return to this planet in the form of rain, and they begin their life as grass and plants in the evolutionary process. Are you familiar with this? It's described in Bhagavad Gita purport. It's a standard and sensible by the performance of sacrifice to the demigods, one achieves the planets of the demigods. When the piety of that person is exhausted, that person, the soul, comes down in the form of rain. And the rain falling upon the land nourishes some plant, becomes a plant. The plant is then eaten by the animal, and the cow is milked, and the milk is taken by the person, and then the male inseminates his wife, and then another birth and another, that cycle. It's described. The yagya cycle of attaining heavenly planets. Tell a little Prabhupada story just to illustrate this. Quickly, one morning walk, we're walking along the sidewalk in Brooklyn heading for a park, and Prabhupada stopped abruptly and everyone collided, and he pointed with his cane and he showed there was something growing in between the crack in the sidewalk. Prabhupada said, "What's this?" And he said, "It's a crack in the sidewalk." Prabhupada asked, "How did it get here?" Some of the persons knew something from science, and they said, some spore flew through the air, fell in the crack, and then it grew as a plant. Prabhupada said, "No, it's a demigod that's fallen to earth and has become a blade of grass." Everyone looked at each other like, "What?" And he just didn't explain anything. He just walked on. But the explanation is that explanation. Now, it's not that all blades of grass come that way, but that's one of the ways in which the fall from the heavenly, when the pious merits become exhausted, when Kshinye Punya Marcha Lokam Vishanti, they come back again to Marcha Loka, this place. Here's the final reference. This is from, there's a book that Gaudiya Vaishnavas have put together, perhaps followers of Bhaktisiddhanta or whatever, that are standard verses that illustrate or explain some teachings that are parts of the Vedas. So, Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Abhideya is the process of devotional service. Specifically, this verse is illustrating karma yoga. Karma yoga doesn't give freedom from the fear of birth and death. That's the statement. The Lord said, if one performs sacrifice or karma yoga according to Varnashram Dharma, his fruits will be temporary. By satisfying the gods through sacrifice, he gets good karma and goes to the heavenly planets where he enjoys as if he were a god. He thus enjoys the results of his good karma for a brief time in the heavenly planets. That's making reference to this morning's verse. So we're going to hear more. Stepping back, it's important to understand the context of what's being said. Krishna is going to get there because the essence is bhakti. Certainly there's, extended chapters in Uddhava Gita explaining bhakti. But this is preliminary. It's like, don't go there. Don't go to the position of trying to be the enjoyer of limited and temporary objects with the limited and temporary senses, because it's all limited and temporary and it doesn't bring real happiness, and you stay in ignorance. And 3.5 chapters of that. And now is looking, we'll undergo some austerities and sacrifices to achieve an upgrade. And that's being discussed also. There's obstacles in achieving that heavenly destination, and the happiness achieved there is limited and temporary. Doesn't bring contentment. It brings some sensation, senses and sense object sensation, but it doesn't bring contentment. Not the purpose of the Vedas, although it's within the Vedas. It's not the purpose of the Vedas, and it's not the purpose of human life. Now, of course, Krishna's giving these instructions. At the end of these instructions, he then tells Uddhava, take these instructions and repeat them to the sages in Badrikashram, the associates of Narayan Rishi. This is my giving, my association to them through you. This is the service I want from you. And then you can also travel around the countryside giving these same teachings. You're my nimitta, you're my instrument, you're my missionary, you're my representative. And we're meant to do the same in these, however we move around in our homes and in our communities and in the world around us. Now, how to communicate this depends on time, place, circumstance, but it's important that we receive it and live by it in order to model it and present the proper teachings in the appropriate way given time, place, circumstance. This is our Bhagavad Dharma method. Knowledge and detachment leading to pure devotional service. Detachment from the here, detachment from the hope for happiness in heaven one more thing. Krishna says it in Bhagavad Gita, and it's true, that most people who are religious, they have a very narrow conception of what religion is and what it's meant for. It's meant for becoming pious in this life, so that in this life you can prosper and enjoy, and after prospering and enjoying in this life, one can go to the heavenly planets and enjoy even more. And there's nothing more than this, Krishna says. And it's true. People think that way, commonly. And even if they have an idea that's more than that, that idea that's more than that is laced with this idea. That's the purpose. It's not the purpose. So to make the other purpose or higher purpose very clear, it's repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. And still, we remain attached to the temporary, limited and temporary. It's just, we're conditioned souls. So the Bhagavatam takes us to that transcendental position by hearing, trying to understand, of course, hearing again and again from different angles. And as one becomes more familiar with the Bhagavatam, it becomes more clear how this is saying something that's over there, and this and that, they're saying something that's said in a slightly different way over here. And, the picture starts to fill out. And, it's like a masterpiece of art or a masterpiece of musical composition. There's so many musical instruments or so many different colors or something. And a masterful person appreciates the beauty of that masterpiece. And the Bhagavatam is such a masterpiece. It's meant to elevate our consciousness to transcendence, although it's describing different angles in different ways. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. Oh, 25 after. Who's going to take care of the microphone? You're going to take care of the microphone, or he's going to? Okay, some plan has to be there for when he's not here. Who's going to do it? Okay, you're going to take care of this? Okay. Any comments or questions in the room?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Take the mask away so I can hear you better. Thanks.
I was just wondering, just out of curiosity, in the heavenly planets, since the enjoyment is temporary, so most likely they experience probably boredom over there too, right?
No.
They don't? Oh.
Well, they're absorbed. I mean, there's probably some boredom, but they're absorbed. Like when people go on vacation, go to wherever they go to Hawaii or go to Disneyland or, go wherever they go to, Niagara Falls. They're not bored. It doesn't satisfy, but, they're immersed in enjoying. And then the vacation's over and their money runs out and they go back to work. So it's not exactly boredom. It's, trying to squeeze some pleasure.
So there's some pleasure, but
there's some temporary limited. In the higher sense, there's no pleasure, because the pleasure is not ephemeral or flickering. It's not of the soul. It's not pleasure. Pleasure is of the soul. So in that sense, it's not pleasure. But there's some sensation. Sense is contacting sense object that says yummy.
Which makes it attractive, I guess, to somebody.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have a two-part question, Maharaj. So if the material happiness is always accompanied with jealous, envy, intolerance of others' happiness, and if that's the very existence of the material nature, so I wanted to understand the essence of this text is to get detached or give up envy, or if we get detached, the non-envious automatically follow.
The question you're asking was sent to me yesterday by one of the Chinese devotees that's teaching Bhakti Shastri. The way that they asked it is envy this one, that one, the other one? What's the root behind it all? The answer is ignorance. And with ignorance displaced by knowledge, then envy is gone, and the byproducts of ignorance. So all of the material experiences, the root of it is ignorance. Ignorance, the root of ignorance is ignoring Krishna. There's little baby ignorances running around that are ignorance rooted in ignoring Krishna. So it's not just gathering knowledge without knowing Krishna. And now I've got so much knowledge and now I'm detached. It's also limited and temporary. But when one has the root of ignorance is dissipated, that potential comes about through bhakti. So now, in response to the way that you worded the question, it's not just get rid of envy or something, it's get rid of ignorance. And to get rid of ignorance means to turn attention again to Krishna fully. What's blocking that is ignorance. And with the ignorance comes envy and the other things. They're the byproduct of the root. Ignorance is the root. Then comes ignorant desires. Ignorance covers the soul. Comes ignorant desires.
Guru Maharaj, is envy, can it be used in any way in Krishna service?
Well, there is such a thing as transcendental envy, but that's for transcendentalists. The left wing and the right wing gopis, for example. But the real interest is Krishna's pleasure. That's how one gets rid of it. I mean, the material aspect is gone when Krishna's pleasure. Who can please Krishna best?
Guru Maharaj, one more follow-up question. So if someone cultivate the quality of non-envious, and then they kind of forget it, and then
and then they kind of what?
Achieve that. They become non-envious. What is the next step?
Well,
what is there anything further?
Non-envious, the what goes in its place, the non-something, you have to have something. And the something is the unrestricted mood of service to Krishna. And then that's non-envious. Then you can become a left-wing or a right-wing gopi and be non-envious. It's not what's next after non-envious. It's you don't get non-envious. You can turn the dial down, or you can hit the pause button, but you can't get rid of it without loving service to Krishna mood. Okay?
I just wanted to say something based on what she just said. You pretty much answered the question, but because I've heard other devotees saying you can dovetail envy, or others devotees say you can dovetail envy, and so the answer to your question to that is that you can, basically, if you're on transcendental platform. use envy in Krishna's service. I was just wanted.
No longer material envy.
Mm-hmm.
Follow?
So what about material envy? Can you dovetail that?
Forget it. Material means forgetfulness of Krishna. That's material envy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you use forgetfulness of Krishna service to Krishna?
Doesn't make sense. Yeah. No. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Online?
This is from Rupa Vilas Das Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada translates Karma Yoga as devotional service in Bhagavad Gita chapter 3.
Yes, he does.
So I would like to understand if this section is about Karma Yoga or Karma Kanda.
When Prabhupada writes that, it's about Karma Kanda. When Prabhupada writes that in Bhagavad Gita, it's a very liberal and broad definition of what Karma Yoga is. There are narrower and more confined descriptions or definitions of Karma Yoga. The one that's we just read, it's kind of like Sakam Karma Yoga and Nishkam Karma Yoga. For Rupa Vilas, I think you're aware of those terms, but for those of you that may not, Sakama Karma Yoga is wishing to not have bondage from work, but I also want something from that effort to become detached from the bondage of work by offering the results of work to Vishnu. I want something. So that's looks like Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda, more in a narrow sense, is rituals within the Vedas for propitiating the demigods for getting something. You worship this demigod to get this thing, you worship that demigod to get that thing. That's Karma Kanda. And it's abundant, volume-wise within the Vedas. Sakam Karma Yoga is not necessarily performing such demigod worship rituals, but it's specifically wanting to become detached from the bondage of work, but still having some desire for myself. So, heavenly elevation, for example. So, Sakam Karma Yoga. It sounds a lot like Karma Kanda. It's not identical, otherwise it would be the same terminology. There's some distinction. I hope that answers your question. Next.
This is from Girivaradari Das Prabhu. Do Karma Kandis who are seeking higher planets attain with their pieties?
Or what?
Piets.
Are they pious? Yeah.
Are they conditioned in higher planets? In higher planets, do these conditioned souls has access to scriptures like Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita to reach Krishna's device from there?
Commonly, demigods are immersed in enjoying the facilities. Generally speaking, they don't go beyond that. They just enjoy, use up their pious credits, and come back. There's others. They continue. Of course, demigods also perform rituals and austerities and so forth, but they're not worshiping demigods because they're demigods. They worship presiding deities of demigod planets for the purpose of expanding their enjoyment. But now specifically, this question is to have, scriptures like the Bhagavatam, etc. Yes, but it's not the main activity. When you go to Hawaii, it's not. Let's go to for your Hare Krishna devotee. Let's go to the temple and the Bhagavatam class. most people, when they go to light, relaxing and enjoying, and time, that's the mood. No, relaxing and having a nice time, that's the place. Recreation is the place. Where, is Krishna at the center of that? That's the question. And the heavenly planets, that's generally not. That's it.